Hello and welcome to Moving Seniors Safely Week. I'm Colette Robichaud, and today I'm chatting with Tisha White. Tisha works with Northwood InTouch, a non-profit provider of medical alarms and other helpful home devices. She helps seniors navigate services to prolong independence and age with dignity, helping them to feel secure in the homes they love. Her role requires her to keep up to date on trends and technologies. So welcome, Tisha. Really excited to talk to you today about new advancements in home tech that will keep us safe and keep us from worrying about our loved ones as well. So I'd like to start off by just having you tell us a little bit about some things that are available to us that have been in the past, and then we'll talk a little bit more about some of the newer items as well.
Sure. So the thing that's been around the longest has been just a basic medical alarm. That's the button that people can wear around their wrist or maybe around their neck, that if they have a problem, like the "help, I've fallen and I can't get up," that catchphrase that people seem to know. That device has been around now for, gosh, I'd say 40 plus years. And it's been helpful to so many seniors. Falls are the primary reason why someone would use that type of service. But, really for any type of emergency, those types of devices can be really helpful, whether it's a breathing problem, a heart problem. It could be that I've seen those devices used even in the case of a home invasion or a fire. So it's just a really great safety net, whether people are living alone, where they may not be able to get to the phone to call for help if something should happen. Or we sometimes see couples as well. So as the couples age, they may each have their own health conditions. And so for both of them, it's a really nice safety net to have that button that can call for help.
Yeah, because the response is so immediate. And I think that is the one that most people think of more often. I know I've been aware of it for many years as well. And there are so many advances, but that's key. I think, people living alone, two people living in the same house, in a larger house, even just out in the yard. I know myself that you think about it, if you live alone and going to a basement, out working in the garden, all of these things that things can happen easily. Why not have that protection and that sort of safety and give you peace of mind? Because even just worrying about that, if you have sort of a medical disorder of any sort, or your balance issue, even the thought of worrying when could that happen is causing a lot of stress on our system and degrading our mental and physical health more as well.
Absolutely. And so having that type of device can not only make the senior feel more secure, but it can also really help give that peace of mind to families who either are close by and who worry, or maybe who are remote as well. So it's just going to give them that peace of mind and also keep them in the loop that if anything should happen where their parent does get taken to the hospital, then they're informed that something's happened, right? So it does keep them in the loop in that way.
And can you just go over a little bit about what that setup would look like in a home? What is required? When we say the word tech, sometimes that can be a little bit scary. And I know, different products work in different ways, but what does that look like in a home, and what sort of space it takes up? Does it have to be in a certain area? Does the person have to have remember things that they have to do?
Yeah, so you raise a lot of really good points, and I think things that families really need to consider when they're choosing ultimately the best device for a parent, when they're working together with the parent to try to come up with what the best solution would be. There is a base unit that would get set up. Traditionally, they've always been set up to a telephone line called a POTS unit, so the plain old telephone line. We're seeing a lot of changes in that, of course, over the last number of years, where even seniors are letting go of their landline, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And those numbers have increased sort of exponentially over the last few years, where a lot of them now just have cell phones. So that's really changed the industry to make sure that we have offerings of those base units that are cell compatible. So the base unit looks the same, regardless of whether it's a cellular unit or one that plugs into the phone line. And the cell unit would work on its own SIM card. So it doesn't connect, the senior doesn't necessarily have to have their own cell phone. They just pay a flat monthly fee for the service, and they would have access to as many help calls as they needed to make. In addition to that base unit, which we would try to place, generally we suggest in the area either where the person is most at risk or the more central location within the home where they spend maybe the majority of their time. And then of course they'd have a button that they can wear. So there's a couple of different types of buttons as the technology has advanced. There's the basic button, which needs to be pressed. So that one can be worn around someone's wrist or around their neck. If they'd like, there's now an automatic fall alert device. We see most offerings have that. And people really like the idea of that because if someone has a fall and they're not able to press the button, then this device will detect it and send the call through automatically.
And I really think that's one example of technology, knowing these things that a lot of people aren't aware, like how amazing is this? And not only are these advancements, but more are coming all the time as we are adjusting to how they interrelate with other technologies. But yeah, how great is that? So if someone falls, that there is that level of security as well.
That's right. So speaking of just different advancements in technology, what we're starting to see now are those devices that no longer restrict people to their home for use. So the ones that we've just talked about, it's for their home environment, so that, you know, when they're really behind closed doors alone and if something should happen. But what I'm seeing is a lot more active seniors who are saying, well, can I use this out and about, right? And that's what we're starting to see now, is that we're starting to see devices that people can take with them. They can either, again, wear them around their neck or wear them clipped onto their belt, and they can go outside of the home. So these devices have the SIM card as well, so it connects them to that cellular network. And they can basically press the button or have that fall detection turned on, where they can go anywhere across the country, really, on that Canadian-wide network and have access to help. So it's that's really exciting. You know, it's not necessarily the solution for everyone. And again, that's where it really comes to doing some research and understanding the pros and cons of each device. One of the great things with the mobile button, of course, is being able to use it away from home. But like a traditional cell phone, it has to be charged every day.
Oh, right.
So for some older folks who might not be used to that, or who you know, don't really want to be fussing and bothering with that, then maybe just the basic device that's more simple, that doesn't have to have any kind of, it's more passive, and that the user really doesn't have to do anything with it. They just need to press it, and they need to make sure they have it on.
Yes, and that's always a start. And Tisha, we talked about this before, that, you know, sometimes the adult, children, or loved one meaning well wants to get the top of the line or the latest, you know, with all the bells and whistles, but we really need to look at each person as an individual. You know, their level of technology of recharging might be too much daily, and we have other people that are way more tech than me. So it is an individual decision, not the decision maybe sometimes of those people that are encouraging to think, I want the best in the whatever, and I'm going to convince mom or dad of that. It really has to be, you know, really an assessment of the whole situation. And just to segue from that, when we have people that are somewhat reluctant in those conversations, you know, what is it that makes someone feel comfortable, and how do we go about talking to our loved ones about just the idea of this and how it could be beneficial? What are some do's and don'ts that you could recommend in all your many years of being in these situations?
Yeah, I think definitely involving the person has to be number one, right? I think families, they don't do it with you know, intentionally to leave the person out. They might think that they're doing a favor and trying to make that decision for them, and they might know that mom or dad would never want to spend money on something like that. And so if the adult child can do the research and even pay for it sometimes, right? They feel like if that's taken care of, then mom or dad will just use it. And what I can say is that is not always the case. Just because mom and dad have it given to them, wearing it is the biggest thing, right? So they may choose to not wear it. It's going to sit on the bureau or whatever. The family think that they've got peace of mind because they've given this to mom or dad. But if they're not wearing it, it's not going to do anything, right?
We really have to elevate that, deal with people with dignity on making these decisions. And we all know just because someone gives us a gift and we may be grateful, that doesn't mean we're going to wear it or use it or do in any regard as a gift. So sometimes then the adult children or loved ones or caregiver or whatever feels like, well, I've given it to them, I'm paying for it, and then there is some resentment or some issues that come up with that. But I truly believe more work has to be done on the other end, talking about things sooner, and then these decisions are much easier to be made. A lot of times we wait till we're in a trauma or drama situation and we're having discussions when we're short-tempered, the other person is already upset and flustered and and confused. So always earlier planning, earlier conversations, critical conversations at times when we don't need it are way better than having to deal with this in a time when it just isn't going to work in the same way.
Oh, absolutely. And we see that a lot. We get a lot of calls where, people wanted the service in last week because a crisis has happened. So you're exactly right. And it's so much better. We do tend to get calls from folks who are being proactive, even about their own health. So the seniors themselves are calling up and saying, I know someone that something happened to in my building and I don't want to go through that. So they're taking those steps before something happens to them. To get something set up and in place. So yeah.
And I think people like you and I, we see this often. We are those people putting things in place as we go along. You know what I mean? So we've seen so many of those situations, and we know how preventable they could be. So it's like a lot of things. Planning really does eliminate a lot of those situations later on. But they sometimes are difficult conversations because they involve a lot of things that we don't want to talk about.
Yes, exactly. But I think involving, like, as we get back to how do we bring up the subject and how do we really try to get some buy-in when you're involving them to see like what is it that they would like. Some other tips that we've found are that sometimes there may be someone in the family who mom or dad take advice from a little bit easier. Sometimes that tends to be male adult children for some reason. Even though the daughters tend to do a lot of that research and finding the services, sometimes it's the son who's convincing the parent that.
I have seen that, and until you mention it right now, I didn't kind of isolate that as an idea, but that is very good. So again, planning, looking at your resources with the family, who is best. And sometimes that caregiver is worn out, is frustrated because they have delivered it. And sometimes there's someone else that just kind of takes that decision to another level.
Yeah, so I mean, it's each individual family, but we've seen that sometimes that's the case. Having a health professional give the recommendation, and sometimes it takes 3 or 4 or more times for someone to kind of have the information, be told, to think about it, to digest it. And then finally, when they're ready, come to those terms to say, yes, okay, now it's time that I think I need it. So your point of raising it early to start planting those seeds so that when the time is right, they're ready.
What you said about the health professional, medical professional, sometimes when I'm at the doctor discussing something, she might write down the name of something just on her script, and it's not a prescription, but it might be, oh, you can buy that brace over the counter or whatever. But I'm wondering too, I mean, that's not a bad idea for medical practitioners even to say, look into this. And I know you have relationships with lots of people in educating people about what's going on as well, but do the medical professionals, I know they're all so busy, but do they have a chance to make that sort of suggestion to people as they go, as they are, having their checkup with some of our seniors or with ourselves? Are are they doing those recommendations?
Yeah, and that's a difficult one to say. I mean, we certainly try to get the word out there. Now, our doctors have such little time with folks, right?
Exactly.
But I
Yeah.
think in those clinics where they have maybe a nurse practitioner or someone
Right.
seeing an occupational therapist, or there's a social worker involved, some of those allied healthcare professionals are more likely to have the time to really talk about all of those different resources. So that may be, you know, I know not everybody has access to that. But
I
then
think I think that's growing, you know, we're
yes,
having a lot of those allied professionals, and that speaks again to, you know, having other people come in, like a, you know, have a physio assessment on, you know, balance and all those other things that can come into place that might help along with that decision. You know, someone else that's sort of that navigator to say, oh, I think it's a good idea to have this assessment. And, you know, maybe then you can talk about balance and things like that. And a lot of times that outside member outside of the family to be having some of that advice, input, you know, and kind of drip, drip, drip in the conversation can be of a high assistance.
that's right. Majority of people, when they come on to our service, it's word of mouth is how they hear about
Yeah.
us. So it's that, you know, chatter in the community, again, hearing that someone's had an incident and they've heard how the service worked for them, or someone didn't have anything. And we've heard, you know, the horrible stories of someone being on the floor for an extended period
Yes.
of time, which really could have been prevented. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And what I know from my experience, I have had seniors tell me that they have been on the floor and that they haven't told their family members, which
Yeah.
is scary too, because that's the other thing that I noticed. I've been, you know, 20 years of talking to seniors and being in their homes and building relationships. And, you know, they do not want their loved ones to be worried about them. And they'll go through a lot to maybe not tell them what's going on sometimes. And that's a little scary as well.
And I think sometimes that may be a challenge in the buy-in into our service. I
Mhm.
think that people see it as a sign that they're losing their independence, unfortunately, because it's the exact opposite. With a system in place that allows them to get help at the touch of a button, then they're really actually being able to prolong their independence and
And that,
stay in their home longer.
mhm.
But they see it as the opposite, unfortunately.
And
And
that's
I
another thing for loved ones and caretakers to be reframing that and talking about it in that way, and really looking at our conversations that we have for sure around that sort of thing. Because
that's yeah, I've had seniors say, you know, my God, my family call me like 3 times a day. And I just, you know, I'm glad now that I have this, that they don't have to call me that many times. Right. So it's that maybe that isn't the case for all seniors, but it's certainly for some.
for
Yeah,
sure,
for
for
sure.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is you know, sort of the meat and potatoes of the service that many people knew of, and the advancement in location is really fabulous. We've got some more time for you just to briefly go through some of the other things. I know there's equipment for stove maybe, and there's things with getting out of the bed, and just to go over briefly a little bit about some of those other things that are available that I think people don't generally know about as well.
Sure. So the stove one is interesting because I've gone out and we've been promoting a device now for a number of years, and it's not any specific age group that has a particular interest. It's across the board because I think everyone can relate to a time when they've forgotten something on the stove, right? That can so easily happen, especially when we're trying to multitask and do a bunch of things at the same time. So we do have a device that will shut the stove off automatically if someone were to forget. So that's really great if someone is starting to have some memory issues, or just as a safeguard, right, for those people who are juggling a few things at the same time. And so for families to know that mom and dad have this extra protection, that they can still cook, but if something happens, then the stove is going to shut off on its own, is, again, just the peace of mind that affords is really, really priceless.
I think that's really fabulous. I've been telling my clients for years too that I started by just saying, when the stove is on, the light over it will be on, whether I need it or not. and the stove is not off till I turn that off. So it's always a reminder. It gives me just that added step that I've been doing that for 10 years in my head, to add it in as something to create those kind of brain pathways to be thinking.
That's an
what is another
excellent.
cue. So
Yeah.
that's the one I've been passing on for the last 10 years. And I say, I've been doing it. And my clients are like, you're too young to do that. I say, no, I'm not. I plan ahead. When I renovated the bathroom, I have a grab bar. You know, I carry my cell phone when I go to my basement, or, you know, so these are things that I think we forget, that we can plan ahead to do things, and that planning can be a soft landing in where we want to go. So it's not, as I said before, waiting for the trauma and the drama to be trying to deal with this.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that tip. I'm gonna be using that one.
Very good. And that's what these interviews are about, to learn tips from each other, to learn what's available. There are so many resources out there, and just, I mean, as you would know, growing all the time, but you know, where are the places to go, whether it's resources in technology or resources in how to have these conversations with our loved ones to keep us safe for the long term.
That's right. And again, you talked about dignity earlier on, you know, it really is that allowing them to still maintain that routine and lifestyle that they've had. And it's just adding those safety elements on top of it, right? Whether it's with a stove sensor, maybe it's a pill dispenser. So we do have automated pill dispensers where someone's medications can be loaded in. And then at the time of the medication they need to take, then it's going to alarm. So it's like that automated DOS set. That's just that extra cue that ensures that someone is taking that right dose at the right time, and helping to avoid any missed doses, but even potentially double dosing, right?
Yeah. So, and I remember talking to one of my clients, and this was many, many years ago, and she had all the capsules in the thing. She had 2 grocery bags of them, and she was trying to piece together that she didn't take this one here and this one there, and she had that many with pills left in all of them, that she wasn't taking them properly. And then she was trying to go from memory to try to piece them together, and requesting that I would deal with that and try to make that work when that was off of the table, and we had to come up with some new ways of doing it, for sure.
Well, and now with the pharmacies all offering that pill packaging, that's fantastic. So really encouraging people to take advantage of those types of services, even if there is a fee, which I think a lot of them have waived now, or insurance will cover, but it's well worth it. You know, to have that peace of mind. It's labeled. The folks that we're working with our medication device, those pill packs have stopped working. So families or caregivers are coming in, and they're noticing that maybe they're selectively being taken, you know, rather than going up and down or going across, like they're just not being taken in any kind of logical order. So that's where a device like ours can help to assist with that.
Yes, and I think you hit on something when we talk about that individual scenario, is like, what is the problem we need to solve? So, and it might not have been a problem yesterday that they didn't trip over the rug, or they didn't wander and, you know, go out the door, but that can change in an instant. But when we're analyzing, what is it? And then once we know where the issues of that individual are, some things are not an issue, then we go and we look at the resources to go with that.
That's right. And with different providers, what I will say is that some you're more tied into the options that you choose, and then other providers are going to be much more flexible as far as not requiring a contract and allowing you to change, downgrade, upgrade the equipment that you have. So I think that that's something, when we talk about looking at options, that's an important option to look at, depending on, you know, the parent's health. And you mentioned earlier, do you go with all the bells and whistles and all the tech and, you know, like things like an Apple Watch, right? Those types of devices are really coming more mainstream. So families might think, oh, well, it has the fall detection now and the latest device, and it has heart rate and all these different things that it can monitor, which sounds really great. And I think that there is definitely a group of the population who that's really going to benefit. But like, think about your parent. Will your parent really use those things? Will they be able to see it? Will they remember to charge it? Do they have the most up-to-date version of an iPhone that they can use with it? So it's not just the watch itself. It requires a lot of other things to go along with it. And so sometimes what might be the best thing is just the most simple, basic technology that's been tried and tested and has been around forever. It doesn't seem that exciting because it's not the newest and greatest with all the flashy things, but it really, I mean, it's tried and true.
Yeah, and people don't need to make those decisions for their loved one based on their preferences and excitement, and maybe they are an early adopter to tech. And once you're starting to sell on that idea too much, it can be too much. So as as we said before, simple is best. So looking at each individual scenario. So I'll get you, Tisha, to speak a little bit about the device that happens for wanderers. I think that's what we call it sometimes, the people in the bed, and the devices that if people are gone too long. Am I correct?
Yeah. Yep. So it can be used for a number of different scenarios. And it's certainly, as we get into those types of sensors, it really is much more a device for the caregiver, because those devices are used with a caregiver in the home. And so something like a bed alarm, there's a pad or a sensor that gets placed underneath the mattress. It can tell when there's weight on the sensor. So that way, when the weight lifts off the sensor, meaning someone's gotten out of bed, we can program it so that it either alerts right away to alert that caregiver in the home that the person is out of bed. That might be because of a potential wandering issue. It could be because the person is a high risk of falls. So there could be a number of reasons. They might just need help to get to the bathroom. Right.
Exactly.
And so it does alert the caregiver. The other way, if somebody is more independent, but maybe still at a higher risk, is that the sensor can actually have a delay timed. So say it takes the person maybe 10 minutes to get to the bathroom and back. So the device will start the countdown when they get off of the bed. And then if they haven't returned to the bed within that allotted time that's been programmed, then it will send the alarm to alert someone that something's not right. Again, it might not mean that there's a fall or something, right? But it does start that process of someone being alerted that something's not quite right.
For sure. And because I do so much downsizing and relocating, that idea of sort of the bedroom, the new bedroom, a lot of times family members think, oh, it's a good time to get a new mattress because their old mattress was old and sunk in and all this. So they get a new mattress that's 2 feet high, and the senior gets out of bed and falls because they're not used to it, or they're not getting out on the same side of the bed and looking ahead to what they would see. So, from my perspective, there's lots of things physically they can think about if you're changing the environment. I always recommend to leave all the lights on in the house. Try to set up the bed that they would walk if it's an ensuite, or if they're on the same side of the bed that they would directionally, maybe the light in the hallway be going in the same way. So we forget a lot of that nuance things that can just add an extra cognitive load on someone. But all of us, when we're sleeping and we have to get up, we know if we're staying in a hotel or somewhere, we can easily forget. But when someone relocates or downsizes, they've already gone through all this. We bring them in, we shut the moving truck doors, and we think, oh, everything's good to go. But there's all these new things that are just adding to some of the issues we already had. So even if before maybe we didn't consider some of these devices, maybe even in the new location, to think about working those in with the new routines and making it a part of that might be, while they're adjusting, that might be a way to go as well.
And that might be a way to frame it, right? Like, again, if you're looking at a provider that doesn't have a set contract, then, just for that adjustment period while they are settling in, I think is a really great recommendation. They may decide once they have it. Oftentimes people will see that how it makes them feel when they have it, that sense of security, then they're reluctant to give it up. But it is a great opportunity, a time for them to give it a try.
For sure. And that, I think that is a key point, to look at the contracts, because I think that's another aspect of having the conversation, that, to maybe try it for several months or whatever, to move that along. So
that's right. And The other thing that I will just caution, it has happened from time to time. We see it pop up in the industry, is where every now and then there'll be a company who will go door to door and who may not be on the up and up. So really having the conversation with parents around, not signing anything on the spot, that if there is someone who comes to their house, then, great, take the information, talk it over with family. And I know that some of those door-to-door sales folks can be really high pressure from the stories that I've heard.
They're highly trained to do that, and they have an answer for everything, and
every objection. Yeah.
And this is what's coming up, looking into the frauds and scams, that it's not just seniors, it's all of us. We know how we can be dragged down something online or here or there, but that's one thing to think about. What I would almost role play with some of my clients when someone is trying to pressure them, that we would practice saying the phrase, I make no purchases without discussing it with my son. And that's whether it's on the phone or whatever. And I say, as much as they try to take you somewhere else, that's the phrase. And I would, some people, you say that once and they know it. For other ones of my clients living independently, we would practice that. And I say, do not engage in any other conversation. Just leave it at that.
Yeah. Yeah. And mine is, I don't make any decisions on the spot. I like to give it 24 hours before I make a major decision. Absolutely. Yeah. So that is so important. Mm-hmm. And I think, seeing that a business is reputable, either that they've been around for a long time, because we have seen these sort of fly-by-night companies that pop up, and then we hear folks coming to our service because they can't get through to any number that they've been given. So it's really buyer beware. Just do some homework, check around. Are they registered with the Better Business Bureau? What's their history? So it's worthwhile when choosing a provider that you really do that homework.
Yeah, for sure. And the frauds and scams have just been going up and up and up. And there's just no recourse with most of these. They're just not things that can be tracked, and it's just a real shame. But there are a lot of issues that pop up with that.
Yeah.
So Tisha, just in some closing words, are there any other sort of things that you would say that's up and coming, or other things that are popular? I think we covered a lot of the main ones, but are there any other ones that you would like to just mention quickly before we close down for today?
Yeah, I think a lot of the smart home things are starting to, there's a lot of things out there. I think that for folks who are savvy, like those early adopters, and it might be, the adult children who are really into the technology, and if you've grown up with it, it can be quite easy to adapt to it. Sometimes they're really keen to set folks up with all the bells and whistles. So like the Google Home and all of the smart thermostats and lights and everything, right? And then that also allows the family to be able to, help mom or dad with those types of things, and for lack of a better word, monitor from afar. So those things are available. Right now, they're sort of all spread out. So they're on the shelf. People can buy them, differing price points, right? So obviously those people who have the money will be able to afford, and those who can't will go without, unfortunately, right now. But there is work being done where to look at bringing some of those things together, and having that support to be able to support someone in the community through different packages and different things. So I think
that's a direction we need to get, sort of like Command Central. I love having the doorbell that I can see here or anywhere else, and even if you think about it, a lot of people have falls in the past because they're trying to get to a phone quickly or trying to get to the door. But a lot of times, we have our hub, we have our favorite chair, we have whatever. So the more that advances, and I think a lot of those things, again, if you wait too long to try and say, oh, mom, this works well, or dad, it's just too overwhelming. So if you're even thinking about it and you have it in your home, I always say it's a drip, 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 even just to show them a little bit of how it works in your home and how you're enjoying it. You don't have to be doing a hard sell immediately, just a gradual chat with that. We all love our independence, and at certain points in our life, things start getting removed. Oh, you know, maybe we're not allowed to drive anymore, and that's removed. And, you know, maybe someone's helping us with their finances, and maybe, you know, we love to take care of our garden and we're getting so the more and more removed, we have to be hypersensitive that we are, you know, that it's not another thing that you can't do this or you can't do that, that what we're talking about today, that these are things that are going to help make their life easier and present it in a way that is easy for them to understand as well.
That's right. And starting with one thing at a time, right?
Absolutely.
Rather than, you know, setting up that full this and that, the doorbell and all these things, like start with one thing. And maybe it's a gift, right? For Mother's Day, Father's Day, a birthday, something. And then from there, if that goes well, then you can start to add on, right? I think that through the pandemic, people's introduction to Zoom and all of that technology, right? Where they never would have touched it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a lot of folks who are using that on a regular basis, and it's starting with that. And I think that's a great introduction then to start getting into some other other types of tech.
For sure. One of the pluses that definitely came out of it, for sure. Well, I think anyone listening has learned a lot. It's been great chatting with you. And I know you have some other resources and links and your contact information that we will attach to this program today. So it's been a pleasure talking to you. And I look forward to getting more information and having more chats in the future.
Thank you so much, Colette. It's always great chatting with you.
Thank you.